جونی میری یا محمد، لوٹ کر میں نہ جاؤں گا خالی، تم زمانے کے مختار ہو یا نبی، بے کسوں کے مددگار ہو یا نبی، تم زمانے کے مختار ہو یا نبی، بے کسوں کے مددگار ہو یا نبی، سب کی سنتے ہو اپنے ہو یا غیر ہو، سب کی سنتے ہو اپنے ہو یا غیر ہو، تم غریبوں کے غمخوار ہو یا نبی، بھر دو جھولی میری یا محمد، لوٹ کر میں جاؤں گا خالی، زندگی کا بھروسہ نہیں، ذکر حیدر کیا کیجئے، زندگی کا بھروسہ نہیں، ذکر حیدر کیا کیجئے، عاقبت بھی سور جائے گی، یہ فریضہ ادا کیجئے، لاکھ سجدے کیے جائیں پھر بھی بخشش نہ ہو پائے گی، ہاں لاکھ سجدے کیے جائیں پھر بھی بخشش نہ ہو پائے گی، ڈھولائیں تیرے بعد ڈولائے کوئی نہیں، تیرے بعد جہان چ محبوبہ، مٹھا اور بولائے کوئی نہیں، تیرے عشق بنا میں حاکم نے، پر ہور تے چولائے کوئی نہیں، کی عرشت ہے کی فرشت ہے، سرکار تو لائی کوئی نہیں، بلغ العلا بکمالہ، کشفت الدجی بجمالہ، حسنت جمیع خصالہ، صلوا علیہ وآلہ، او منزل کدی نہیں پا سکتے جڑے جان دیول تو ڈر گئے،
مولا علی یہ فرماتے ہیں کہ انسان کو حق کے لیے اگر جان بھی دینی پڑے تو پوری دنیا میں آپ دیکھ رہے ہیں، چاہے پاکستان ہو چاہے سعودی عربیہ ہو، پہلے تو نہیں تھا اب تو ہو گیا، تو بہرحال سعودی عربیہ ہو چاہے عراق ہو چاہے شام ہو، شام میں اس لیے کہ لوگ محبت اہل بیت کرتے ہیں، یہ تاریخ بڑی پرانی ہے، کسی دور میں جناب حجر بن عدی کو بھی محبت اہل بیت کی وجہ سے اور ان کے پاس تو اتنی کرامات تھی، میں یہ واقعہ پڑھ کر حیران ہو گیا، کہا جب جناب حجر کو قتل کرنے لگے اس میں مین بات کیا تھی کہ وہ علی کی محبت کے گن گاتا تھا، وہ علی کو امام حق مانتا تھا، وہ علی کے کردار پر چلتا تھا، لیکن اس کے پاس یہ کرامت تھی کہ دیکھو پوری دنیا میں اگر شیخ عمر کے لیے لوگ کر رہے ہیں تو یہ اللہ کی مرضی ہی ہے، یہ خدا کی چاہت ہی ہے، ورنہ دنیا میں بہت سارے لوگ حق کے لیے جان دیتے ہیں، ان کا کوئی نام لینے والا نہیں ہوتا ہے، دیکھیے حجر پہ ندی، لیکن ان کے پاس کمال یہ تھا، جناب حجر کو جب قتل کرنے لگے تو جناب حجر کہتے ہیں میرا جی چاہتا ہے میں غسل کروں، پروردگار عالم میں مرنے سے پہلے چونکہ تیرے مسیح کی محبت میں مر رہا ہوں تو شہید تو مروں گا، لیکن میں ایسا شہید مرنا چاہتا ہوں کہ مجھے غسل میسر ہو، تو لوگوں سے کہا مجھے غسل کرنے دو مرنے سے پہلے، انہوں نے کہا کمال ہو گئی ہے، ہم تمہیں پانی نہیں پلانا چاہتے ہیں، تو غسل کی بات کرتا ہے، جناب حجر نے دعا مانگی، پروردگار عالم میں غسل کرنا چاہتا ہوں، کیا تو میرے لیے کوئی ایسا اہتمام کر سکتا ہے؟ ابھی جناب حضر کی دعا کے لفظ ختم نہیں ہوئے تھے، اتنی بارش ہوئی کہ تحریر میں ملتا ہے کہ جناب حضر اور ان کے ساتھیوں نے بارش کے پانی سے غسل کیا، پھر علی کی محبت میں جام نوشی کا
اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد۔
کہا جاتا ہے بارش کے پانی سے غسل کیا، پھر علی کی محبت میں، اور اکیلے نہیں تھے۔ آپ جانتے ہیں کہ شیخ زکزکی کے کتنے بچوں کو شہید کیا گیا ہے، لیکن ان کے اندر بھی تو ولایت علی ہے، انہوں نے بھی تو درس حجر سے لیا ہے۔ یہ حجر بن عدی تھے، جب انہیں کہا کہ تمہیں ماریں گے تو وہ کہتے ہیں میرے سے پہلے میرے بیٹے کو مار دو۔ تو وہ کہتے ہیں کہ بڑے عجیب آدمی ہو، دنیا کا پہلا انسان دیکھا ہے جو کہتا ہے میرے مار رہے ہیں، اس کو قتل کرنے لگے ہیں، لیکن کہتا ہے مجھ سے پہلے میرے بیٹے کو مار دو۔ تو انہوں نے کہا کمال ہے، تو کیسا دیوانہ ہے، دنیا کا ہر باپ چاہتا ہے کہ اگر میری جان چلی بھی جائے تو میرے بیٹے کی جان بچ جائے اور یہ دنیا میں محفوظ رہے۔ جناب حجر جانتے کہ زندگی کی بقا حقیقت شہادت میں، اور حقیقی زندگی جو ہے وہ دامن اہل بیت میں ہے، اور اس دنیا کے جانے کے بعد میں ہے، جسے معلوم ہو کہ مرنے کے بعد علی کے سامنے قبر میں شرمندہ نہیں ہوں گا، بلکہ علی آ کر مجھے اپریشیٹ کریں گے اور کہیں گے واہ حجر، علی کی قبر میں تو زیارت ہوگی، لیکن علی آ کر کہے واہ حجر تیرے کیا کہنے، تو خود بھی آیا اور اپنے بیٹے کو بھی لایا۔ تو یہ تو بہت بڑا کمال ہے جو اس معنی کو سمجھتا تھا، اس کی مینے کو سمجھتا تھا کہ مرنے کے بعد کی حقیقت زندگی جاودانی ہے، یہ حقیقی فنا نہیں ہے، میری حقیقی بقا ہے۔ تو کہا میرے بیٹے کو مار دو۔ انہوں نے کہا تم دیوانے ہو گئے، اپنے بیٹے کو مرنے کا کیوں کہہ رہے ہو؟ کہا کہ میں اپنے دل میں یہ خوف لے کر مرنا نہیں چاہتا کہ میں دنیا سے چلا جاؤں اور میرے جانے کے بعد ہو سکتا ہے میرا بیٹا موت کے ڈر سے، یعنی باپ کو قتل ہوتے ہوئے تلوار سے، بچہ یعنی اپنے قدموں سے ہٹ نہ جائے۔ میں چاہتا ہوں یقین کی موت مروں، جب میرے سامنے حوض کوثر پہ جاؤں تو میرے ساتھ میرا بیٹا بھی ہو اور میں بھی۔ اور واقعہ شیخ زکزکی کے بچے بھی جب وہ دنیا میں گئے ہیں تو اللہ انہیں حوض کوثر سے سیراب کرے گا اور انہیں نعمات جنت سے نوازے گا، لیکن اکیلے نہیں، بہت ساری اولاد کو لے کر گئے، دل میں ولائے علی لے کر گئے۔ تو میری دعا ہے پروردگار عالم اگر موت دینا تو محبت اہل بیت پہ دینا اور سیرت محمد وآل محمد پر دینا۔ صلوات بھیجنے والے میرے معزز سامعین گرامی، میں گفتگو جب شروع کی تھی تو گزارش یہی کر رہا تھا کہ انسان جو بھی عمل کرتا ہے وہ رضائے الہی ہے، لیکن ہمارا عمل ہو یا جتنا اچھا یا نیک انسان ہو اس کا عمل ہو، یا چاہے کوئی اصحاب رسول میں سے ہو یا ازواج رسول میں سے ہو، ان سب کا جو عمل ہے وہ اللہ کی رضا کے لیے کہ اللہ راضی ہے، یعنی سب اللہ کو راضی کرنے کے لیے عمل کر رہے ہیں، یعنی خوشنودی خدا کے لیے۔ لیکن نبی جو کام کرتے ہیں یا رسول وہ جو عمل کرتے ہیں اس میں رضائے خدا شامل ہوتی ہے، یعنی کبھی وہ کوئی ایسا عمل کرتے بھی نہیں ہے کہ جس میں اللہ راضی نہ ہو، بلکہ وہ جو اللہ چاہتا ہے وہی کرتے ہیں۔ حقیقت یہی جو رب کی منشا ہو وہی کرتے ہیں۔ اگر اللہ اولاد بڑھاپے میں دے تب بھی راضی ہوتے ہیں، اگر نہ دے تب بھی راضی ہوتے ہیں، اگر مال دے تب بھی راضی ہوتے ہیں۔ لیکن میرے معزز سامعین گرامی، مجھے ایمان سے بتائیے، ایک بیوی ایسی ہے جس کا نام شہزادی فاطمہ الزہرا، کہا کہ جو اس کو راضی رکھے سمجھ لے اس نے رب کو راضی کیا، یعنی جس نے محمد مصطفیٰ کو راضی رکھا اس نے فاطمہ الزہرا کو راضی رکھا، اور جس نے مصطفیٰ کو راضی رکھا اس نے رب کریم کو راضی رکھا۔ لیکن راضی کی تو بات ہے، عجیب جملے ہیں۔ کہا کہ جبریل یہ بھی بتا دو میرے مصطفیٰ کے ذریعے اگر کسی نے اس فاطمہ زہرا کو غضب نہ کیا تو سمجھ لینا اس نے رب کریم کو غضب نہ، یعنی اس کو کبھی غضبناک نہ کرنا۔ لیکن کمال یہ ہے کہ وہ شہزادی جب اس دنیا سے گئی ہے تو روایت بتاتی ہے میری آقا زادی جاتے ہوئے وصیت کرتی ہے اور ایک ہی جملہ کہا میری شہزادی نے علی ابن ابی طالب میری کچھ خواہشات ہیں، کہا شہزادی زہرا بتاؤ تو صحیح۔ بی بی زہرا فرماتی ہے علی ابن ابی طالب مجھے رات کے وقت غسل دینا، مجھے رات کے وقت کفن دینا، مجھے رات کے وقت دفن کرنا۔ بعض علماء لکھتے ہیں کہ یہ پہلا جنازہ تھا جب غسل دے رہے تھے علی ابن ابی طالب اتنا روتے ہیں، جناب فضہ شہزادی پوچھتے ہیں اے علی ابن ابی طالب اتنا رونے کا سبب کیا ہے؟ کہا کاش اے فضہ تجھے بتا سکتا کہ شہزادی زہرا کے ساتھ کتنا ظلم ہوا۔ الا لعنۃ اللہ علی الظالمین ومن یعلم الذین ظلموا والقلب ينقلبون۔ تمام موجودین سے ریکویسٹ ہے شیخ باقر محمد اور خصوصاً جس مرحوم اسد علی شیخ کی رسالہ ثواب کے لیے مجلس کا اہتمام کیا گیا اور مرحوم شیخ جوید اقبال ان کے لیے سورۃ الفاتحہ۔ مومنین اکرام آپ سے ریکویسٹ ہے شیخ افتخار صاحب کی اہلیہ ہاسپٹل میں ہے اور کل حیدر ہے اور جتنے مومن والدہ شبیر صاحب ہے اور شیخ شاہد صاحب ہے، حمیدہ اہلیہ بشیرہ صاحب ہے اور حمیدہ مرتضیٰ ہے اور جتنے مومنین بیمار ہیں ان کا ثقافت علی ہے، ان کا حسنین ہے، زوجہ محمد حسن حسنین ہے، ان سب کے لیے خصوصاً شیخ صاحب کی اہلیہ کے لیے ہسپتال میں ہے۔ تمام مومنین سے ریکویسٹ ہے 5 سال بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم من یجیب المضطر اذا دعاه ویکشف السوء 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 من یجیب المضطر اذا دعاه ویکشف السوء۔ اللهم صل علی محمد و آل محمد۔ خدایا محمد و اہل بیت محمد کی عزت و عظمت کا واسطہ شیخ صاحب کی اہلیہ کو شفائے کاملہ نصیب فرما اور جتنے مومنین بیمار ہیں ان سب کو شفائے کل نصیب فرما۔ تیری ذات غفور رحیم، تیری ذات علی کل شیء قدیر۔ اس ذکر کے صدقے
روزی کسے دی بند نہیں کردا، رکھی یاد او پاک محمد دا، گستاخ پسند نہیں کردا۔ منکر تے آخر منکرے پاویں مکیوں ہوئی آوے، منکر تے آخر منکرے پاویں مکیوں ہوئی آوے، زنگ زم لال بھی نہیں لتنا پاویں تن من دھو بھی آوے، جنوں حاکم اج تائیں نہیں ملیا کتھا چاہ کے وہ بھی آوے، رب آکھیا سونیا نہ جڑکی تیرے در تے جو بھی آوے، اسا نوکر پاک محمد دے سن ہور عزاز نے پج دے، اسا ناز اٹھاون مدنی دے کسے ہور دے ناز نے پج دے، محبوب بنا کسے ہور اگے سن کھولنے راز نے پج دے، جگ رس دا حاکم رس جاوے سرکار ناراض نہیں پج دے، ہر غیب تو رب ہے غیب وڈا، ہر غیب تو رب ہے غیب وڈا، سنے واسطے غیب تے کوئی نہیں، لا ریب حضور دی ذات جویں ہور لا ریب تے کوئی نہیں۔ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਨਾਇਬ ਵੀ ਹਾਕਿਮ ਖੁਦ ਵਰਗਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਨਾਇਬ ਵੀ ਹਾਕਿਮ ਖੁਦ ਵਰਗਾ ਦੂਜਾ ਬਣਦਾ ਨਾਇਬ ਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਨਹੀਂ
والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين أما بعد. Firstly, I'm a bit perplexed in which language to talk in. 90% of the discussion has been in Urdu. He's asking Farsi. Some people are saying English. I'll ask our guests, which language should we talk in? What do you feel comfortable in? English?
Yes.
Consensus is English. The sisters are saying English very loudly. Right, okay, so we'll start our discussion in English.
فواز بلند صلوات اللهم صل على محمد.
Today brings my series of lectures that we've been having, be it in Glasgow, be it in Aberdeen, now it's in Edinburgh, to an end. Tonight is a very important night because we are seeing a unity which is taking place.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah.
This unity is exceptionally important for us if this nation is going to move forward. In the words of one of the greatest scholars in Pakistan, Shah Ahmad Durrani, when he was asked by somebody, he was asked that, Maulana, tell me, are you Sunni or are you Shia? Having been a great Sunni scholar. He replies very beautifully, he says, son, after Karbala there's only two parties. Either there's Hussein or there's Yazid. I'm proud to be with Hussein. This was that reality that Sufi Barkat Ali also, for all of his life, propagated. The Ishq of Hussein, the door of Ali, the Medina of the Prophet. This is all this reality that we also, as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, hold very closely to us. So today you've seen an entire majlis, a mahfil of dhikr, and I know many of you may not have understood what's happening. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring together an explanation of what they were doing and the necessity of dhikr with the birth of the Prophet of God. And I know that time is running short. I know many of you are tired. I know many of you tomorrow have programs, but again, until 11 o'clock you'll be sleeping. So because of which, and Fajr these days is very late as well. So because of which, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take maybe half an hour more of your time, so 1.5 hours if that's okay. I'll try and finish this as quick as possible.
فواز بلند صلوات
But nevertheless, for those people who were here in the last two lectures, and for those people who are fresh, I'm just going to summarize very quickly the discussion that we were having. Look, 2016 is a very important year for us. And the reason being is that Islam is going through many troubles, trials and tribulations. Look and see in the last 10 years how quickly the situations have been changing. If you look at all of the ahadith of Akhir al-Zaman, you'll see all of them slowly but truly are coming into fruition. Look at it and see yourself. Well, ahadith to say, for example, says that here, a statement is being given that I can see. In Akhir al-Zaman, there'll be mosques upon mosques. People standing on the front lines, shoulder to shoulder. But the description of Akhir al-Zaman is such that people will come to the mosques for one purpose, and that's to do riba. In the same way the hadith says, the entire lines will be full of the Jamaat But the purpose was, when they come together, they'll have bughd in their hearts for one another. Here the Prophet of God is emphasizing. He's saying that in Akhir Zaman, Muslims would have gone so far away from Islam. You will see fitna rise, fitan. Look at it and see the Khariji, which is rising today. 20 years ago, this reality wasn't as strong as you find today. You find that this concept of Wahhabism, Kharijism, Takfirism is now spreading in the way the Prophet said. He emphasized, both Sunni Shia believe in this, that the Prophet of God said, Akhir Zaman, Islam will be gharib in the way Islam was gharib at the very beginning. Ya Rasulullah, in the beginning of Islam there were only a couple of people. In Akhir Zaman will there also be a couple of people? What is the reply to that? No, there will be millions of Muslims, but they'll be far away from the spirit of what Islam is. They'll become na'ahl to Islam. This is what we're seeing today. Understand this. The adat of the Prophet and his family have been made incumbent on you. The philosophy was given by the daughter of the Prophet, that she emphasized the fact, as long as you are united behind us, what happens? You will not divide. And the minute that you leave us, you'll divide. When you divide, the la'an of Allah will be upon you. What happens when the la'an of Allah is upon a person? First thing, dhikrullah goes away from him. Right? Firstly, he becomes mahroom to dhikrullah. Secondly, depression. Thirdly, illnesses. Fourthly, barakah is removed. You see that entire nation will be corrupted and destroyed. Today, in our own centers, you are finding that there's division. Today, we claim to be the followers of the Prophet and his family. And today you find ana has become an issue. Our communities are dividing because of this. The reason being is that we've left the teachings of the Prophet and his family. Come very far from it. Look at the hadith words. In fact, look at the Quran, what it says. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. All of you, hold on to the rope of Allah. وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Don't create divisions. If the Prophet was to come today, he would not say that I'm a Shia. He would not say that I'm a Sunni. He would not say that I'm a Deobandi. He would not say that I'm Ahl Hadith. He would not say that I'm Ismaili. He would not say that I'm Bohra. He would not say I'm etc. etc. What would he say? If asked, he would say I'm a Muslim. And this is the haqiqah, Muslim. In the same way, if in Akhir Zaman we are to survive, look, there are three types of hadith that you find on Akhir Zaman. First is to do with the social political situation. Secondly, to do with the economical situation. And thirdly, to do with the Muslims and the hal of the Muslims themselves. Go and look at it and see. When it comes to the geopolitical situation, what does it say? Intense hadith from Syria to Yemen to Iraq to Pakistan. In fact, there's a hadith that says in Akhir Zaman, Sindh will split. And a hadith like that wouldn't be hard. But I've given 60 lectures over the last 2 months on these signs. I don't want to go into all of the details. But what I will say is this, that 90% of all of the signs which I mentioned are in front of us now. What the Prophet said was the truth, and today it's materializing. How many people do you know 1400 years after what they've said, the truth is materializing? We've not seen situations like this. If you've even put the Prophet to one side, those people the Prophet taught and predicted. Like who? Like who? Like Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. The common denominator between all of us is the Prophet and Mawla Ali. Each one of us believes in him. Everyone here believes in him. You know one of the predictions he made? Written in the books, comes down to words. So people can say that maybe these are made up. No, I remember narrating them 4 years ago. It's on YouTube. This year it happened. In what sense? When Russia intervened within Syria and when China 1 month ago came into Syria. These predictions is there. One day Imam says, Imam Ali alayhi salam says to Kumayl, he says, Kumayl, let's go into the desert. He says, Mullah, how comes? He says, I want to tell you something. As they begin to go, he says, look, the Prophet of God has taught me. That one, the Prophet of God says, Ana Madinatul ilm wa aliyun babuha. Surely there's great knowledge in that. Ali himself says, he says, Rasulullah taught me a knowledge that opened 1,000 doors. And that opened 1,000 doors. This isn't physical, this is spiritual. This is the reality of the soul. This is the concept of wilayah. He taught him how to become a wali at the highest level.
MashaAllah.
This ilm is ilm huduri, this ilm is ilm ladunni. This is directly from Allah. So here, and understand this, no one can get wilaya without coming to the door of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Nizamuddin Awliya is a very famous Sufi saint. If you go to Delhi and if you go into his shrine, there's a story there. The story goes like this. It says that a man comes to Nizamuddin and he says to him, what is the difference between your wilaya and Ali's wilaya? Ali has wilaya, you have wilaya, what's the difference? Why do you guys praise Ali for? Beautifully replies. He says, when you go into the castle of the king, right, and you sit down with the king has his dinner there. The king eats, you eat. The same food both of you are eating. The difference is that the king eats his food, but you eat the king's food. He says, wilaya is the same thing. We may have wilaya because we eat from the table of Ali, but the reality is that Ali gives us, therefore we eat otherwise. Therefore no Sufi can become a Sufi without the wilaya of Ali. No Qutb can become a Qutb without the wilaya of Ali. No Shia can become a Shia without the wilaya of Ali. No Sunni can become a Sunni without the wilaya of Ali. Why? Because Sunni and Shia, all of these things go back to one thing, and that is the Sunnah of the Prophet. What is the Sunnah of the Prophet? And this is where I want to begin my discussion. What is Sunnah? What is the manifestation of Sunnah? Today we are all sitting here Ahl Sunnah because we believe in the Sunnah of the Prophet.
MashaAllah.
Each one of us is incumbent upon us to apply the Sunnah of the Prophet. Because this Sunnah is the Sunnah of Allah. This is why. What do I mean? Where does it start? It starts off from the very beginning. It starts off from here. Allah says, even before creation, before He created anything, He was able of Ayyub, He was hidden. And so this hadith Qudsi that says, Kuntu kanzal makhfi. I was a hidden treasure. فَأَحْبَبْتُ أَنْ أَعْرَفْ. And I love to be known. Allah created the universe therefore. He was a hidden treasure. He loved to be known. Nobody knew Him. He was hidden. So He created. The purpose of this creation, فَأَحْبَبْتُ أَنْ أَعْرَفْ. Because He loved to be known. The power of love came. The very first thing, according to our mystics and according to our philosophers and theologians, the very first thing Allah created was the haqiqat al-Muhammadiyah, the reality of the Prophet. The very first thing was the nur of the Prophet. From this nur, the entire universe has been created. In fact, no, if I was to take it a step further, the entire universe is what essentially? It is the names and the characteristics of Allah which are scattered. That's what the universe is. The universe is names that gather. I'm going to make it slightly technical for 5 minutes, but then I'll come back again. The entire universe is the names and the attributes of Allah. Go to the Quran and see. All of these, everything that you see in creation, is a manifestation of the names. Allah's Dhat, you'll never know. The second stage is the Sifat and the names of Allah. The entire universe are names and the attributes of Allah. Look at it and see. Everything goes back to Rahman. I'll give you an example. Allah is Rabb, but He's a Rabb over someone. He's master, but He's master over someone. Allah, for example, is Rahman, but He has to give that mercy to someone, right? The names give the mercy to someone. So I'll give you an example. You're a great-grandfather in potentiality, but until you don't have a great-grandson or a great-granddaughter, until that stage, it's not complete. In the same way, all of these names of Allah, whether it's Rahman, whether it's Rahim, whether it's Jabbar, whether it's Razak, all of these are reciprocal. It's given to someone. Who was it given to? When the entire universe was created and scattered, remember, all of these names that created the universe is the tajalli of Allah. It's as if you're looking at the mirror. The entire universe is a name and an attribute of God. But remember one thing, Allah likes Tawheed. In the same way, the name Allah is Ism Jam, as in it gathers all of the names. Rahman is found in Allah. Rahim is found in Allah. All of the 99 names is found in Allah. In the same way, when Allah created the universe, He created one person. And that person housed the reality of all of the universe. And that person was Adam. From Adam to Khatam, what you realize is that in fact, where even Adam's reality rested, is in the reality of the final Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah is the tajalli of Allah. If you ever look, it's the entire universe that's walking. The name Rahman is found there, Rahim found there, Razzaq found there, Jabbar found there. All of the names of Allah found there within balance. Why is that important? Because of that. Because remember one thing, how do you understand something? You understand something because of a medium, by your intellect. I'll give you an example. We're discussing, I'm talking, words are coming up, the medium is my mind through the microphone is going into your mind, is being processed. In this way you have a hadith, for example. Imam Ali comes to Rasulullah. He says to him, the book is Basair al-Darajat. In that book he says, Ya Rasulullah, who's greater, us or the angels? A book which is 1100 years old. In that book is written, it says, Rasulullah, who's greater, us or the angels? Rasulullah replies, he says, Ali, do you remember when Allah created our nur? From our nur the angels were created. From our nur the angels were created. When the angels woke up to creation, they were bewildered. They were bewildered. When they looked at our nur, they became towards us. They were prostrating nearly towards us. At that moment we said, La ilaha illallah. The angels said, La ilaha illallah. At that moment again they looked towards us, they came towards us. We said, Allahu Akbar. The angels said, Allahu Akbar. We said, Subhanallah. The angels said, Subhanallah. Here the Prophet says, Ali, we taught the angels Tawheed because everything requires a medium. Today you understand Tawheed because your parents teach you, because you read books, because of a medium. In the same way, Allah is to be understood requires a medium. Had there not been a Prophet Muhammad, nobody would have understood Tawheed today. Not Adam, not Nuh, not Ibrahim, not Musa, not Isa. Why? Because the Quran says what? It says we signed what with you? A mithaq, mithaq al-nabiyyin. In Alam Idhar, Allah said to all of the prophets, Alastu bi rabbikum? All of them replied, Qalu bala. At that moment Allah says what? Teaches them the wilayah of the Prophet and his family. This is most important. For everything there is a medium. For everything there is a medium. Think what I'm saying, because I'm going to take it to a stage which is going to completely baffle you if you're not following me there. Because I'm going to link it back to dhikr. So go with me.
MashaAllah.
In this I'll explain exactly what they were doing. For those people who don't know. You see, Allah, to understand God requires a medium. Why? Because Hadith Qudsi says Allah is hidden. Ghaib al-ghayub. You can't see him, you can't find it. Requires a lens, requires a medium to see through. What is that medium? To understand Allah, therefore, angels had to go through Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. In the same way, for human beings to understand requires that. What does that tell us? That tells us that all of the names of Allah are found in Muhammad. Otherwise, you wouldn't know what Rahman is, or Rahim is, or Razzaq is, or any of these names. You wouldn't understand what Kareem is. You wouldn't understand any of these names. Therefore, the names were tajallying from the body of Muhammad for everyone to realize what Allah is.
Nare Takbir! Allahu Akbar! Nare Risalat! Ya Rasulullah! Nare Haydari!
This is why. So now Allah says, Ala bi dhikrullah tatma'innul qulub. At the same way, if you were to do the dhikr of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, it would bring peace to your hearts. Because Muhammad is what? The mujassim of the names of Allah. Manifest one is the dhat, all the names and the attributes of Allah. We came to know Tawheed because of him. We came to know Tawheed. So at that moment when he's leaving, what does he say? Inni tarakan fikum at-taqalain, kitab Allahi wa itrati ahla bayti. He says, I'm leaving behind two things. Two things. One, Quran. One, Ahl Bayt according to some traditions, one Sunnah. Both of them are one for us. Why? Because Ahl Bayt teach us what Sunnah is. Why? Ali teaches us what Sunnah is. Hassan and Hussein teach us what Sunnah is. The daughter of the Prophet, he says, Fatima tu bad'atun minni. Those are traditions. Look at the Fadail of Fatima, which has been mentioned by Sunni and Shia both. Jalaluddin Suyuti has mentioned this, and our scholars have as well. You know what it says? It says this. Who is saying? Our messenger. He says that person who makes Fatima happy makes me happy. That person who makes me happy makes Allah happy. That is something that we need to look at. In the same way, what is Hassan and Hussein? Same reality. If today any Muslim would be asked, who would you be with, Hussein or Yazid? I think if any Muslim is a Muslim, they'd say Hussein. Right? Any Muslim would say Hussein. So now, question is raised. Each Muslim has been told, follow the sunnah of the Prophet. Follow the sunnah of the Prophet. Now tell me something. Sunnah is until the end of times, right? But the Prophet lived for 23 years only. So for example, if I was to ask you the question, space traveling, is there any hadith for traveling into space? You'd say no. Is there any ahkam for traveling into space? You'd say no. The question is this: did Rasulullah say something or didn't he say something on this? In the time Rasulullah lived, 23 years, amongst the Bedouin Arabs, whether the time or the space or the atmosphere didn't allow him to say stuff. So therefore we come to understand, our theologians have said, that there is two types of sunnah. One sunnah is that which Rasulullah made a zahir, and one sunnah which was still in his batin. Both of which the reality is there. If we were to say that there is no sunnah for this or for that, that would be going against the Quran. Why? Because the Quran says, Tibyanan li kulli shay. Quran has knowledge of everything, but you don't have the eyes to see it. For you to understand the Quran, why? For you to understand the Quran requires you for people whose eyes are open to teach you the Quran. Who teaches this Quran? Look and see. Narrated by who? Tabari. Who is Tabari? A Sunni scholar. We look at Tabari. Our brothers look at Tabari. Says in a khutbah, when Imam Hussein was leaving Mecca or Medina, what did he say? He says to Muhammad Hanafi, is very famous. He says that I'm leaving here. خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي. I'm leaving here to do what? To do Islam for the nation of my Jadd. But you know what he says? It's a very beautiful line he says after that. أسير بجدي وأبي. أسير بسيرة جدي وأبي. He says that I'm going or I'm walking on the sunnah of my grandfather and my father. The question is asked is this: Imam Hussein, Rasulullah didn't have a tyrant like Yazid in front of you. He didn't, for example, have only 72 men. He never fought in Karbala. How can you say that you're fighting on his seerah? How can you say that you're fighting on sunnah? Every Muslim will say Hussein was on sunnah. If a Muslim says Hussein wasn't on sunnah, they're not a Muslim. But the question can be asked, Imam Hussein, in the battle of Badr, there was 313, you fought. In Khaybar, for example, you sent one person. Or for example, in the conquest of Mecca, there were 10,000 people, you didn't fight. In Mecca, you didn't fight. In Medina, you fought. Other times, there was a peace treaty. How does Imam Hussein know where Karbala fits all of this? At the one place, you're signing a peace treaty. On another place, what are you doing? You're fighting. And another place, you're going forward, backwards. All of these things. So what's the reality? And it's very simple. Sunnah in and of itself, take the principles of the Sunnah. Here Imam Hussein teaches us, Ahlul Bayt are the only people who can teach you the principles of the Sunnah. Go back to the time of the Khalifas and see. What did the first Khalifa say? What did the second Khalifa say? Had it not been for Ali, we would have been. But why? Because Ali's Ahlul Bayt. Why? Because Ali's what? Nafs Rasul. Where do you find that? Quran says, وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ. Ali is the nafs of the Prophet. There's a difference, right? The difference is this. The tajalli of Sunnah is the Sahaba. The tajalli of Sunnah. But the Sunnah and the dhat of the Sunnah, Ahlul Bayt. Why? Rasulullah said, Fatimatu bad'atun minni. She's a part of me. Husaynu minni wa ana min al-Husayn. Ali is the nafs. Ahlul Bayt, or what we call this Panjat and Pak. What are they? Panj, 10 as we say, 5 bodies, what are they? They are from the part of the Prophet. Anybody who leaves them has left the way of the Sahaba and has left the way of the Prophet. So in this day and age, what is important? What is important is to hold on to the teachings of the Prophet and his family. This is what's important. Because if we leave the way of the family, then we don't know how to act. Because they applied this. So what's important now? Important is this. Sunnah essentially is what? Sunnah is the sunnah of Allah. Allah teaches us through the Prophet how to become kamil, how to go towards him, how to go towards kamal. This is the purpose. What's the purpose of life? The purpose of life is what? وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. It's to worship Allah. Worshipping Allah means يَعْرِفُونَ, to know Allah, to become arif of Allah, to know Allah. How do we know Allah? When we follow the sunnah. What does the sunnah do? The Sunnah teaches us how to actualize the names of Allah inside of ourselves. Now coming to the point of dhikr. What is dhikr and why is dhikr important? Why is the remembrance important? Why are all of these? You see, you have multiple ways of dhikr, right? One of them is your salah, the prayers that you pray. That is a form of dhikr. The other one is when you have intellectual thought. That is also dhikr. The other one is when you mention the names of Allah. Why? In Dua Kumail you read what? Ya man ismuhu dawa wa dhikruhu shifa. Dhikr of Allah is shafa. The names of Allah are what? Purify you. Today, why are human beings depressed for? Think about it and see. Why are you depressed for? Because you've not understood the true nature of dhikr. Dhikr removes, look at the Quran. هُوَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ السَّكِينَةَ فِي قُلُوبِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah puts sakina, He puts peace into the hearts of the people. Who are they? Allah says to you, go to Ahl al-Dhikr. Who is Ahl al-Dhikr? Highest level of Ahl al-Dhikr is Ahl al-Bayt. For what you don't know, go to Ahl al-Dhikr in the same way we've been told to do dhikr. Now to explain what they were doing. Explanation is this, that there are two types of dhikr that a person does. One is lisani and one is qalbi, for example. When we do dhikr of the tongue, from the tongue, we are doing dhikr so it manifests in the heart through repetition. I'll give you an example. Why do you repeat something a couple of times? To give you an example, ulama have said that if you want to purify your heart and to remove negativity from your heart and problems from your life that befall you. I'll give you an example. People who don't have children. Imam Hassan has given a nuskha. For every single person I've told this nuskha to 100% of the time, people have come to me. We don't have children. I've given this nuskha to them. 100% of the time, Allah's given them children. Who says? Imam Hassan. What does he say? I heard from my grandfather Rasulullah. What is this dhikr? This dhikr, for a particular amount of times you recite something. Recently I gave a friend of mine in Orlando, he phoned me up one day and said, Sayyid, Allah's given me twins after 10 years. What is this? First thing is this. Istighfar is important. I'm not going to say from the member how many times you recite it, but Imam Hassan says if you recite this Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayh this many amount of times, husband and wife both, Allah will give you a sign. So we have this repetition. Why? You pray 5 times a day. You recite Surah Al-Hamd as well. In the same way, let's say, and I'm giving you this now because we're discussing this. Generally, I don't discuss this from the member. You have a problem in your life. You can't get a job, let's say. Every morning at Fajr time you wake up, you recite 2 units of prayers, and you say Ya Latif 129 times. What happens? If you do that for 40 days, Allah will give you a job, let's say, if you're having a problem with that. And there are many different things as well. Quran, 6,600 odd verses. Every verse of the Quran is for some problem. Cure of some problem. You have financial problems? Go and recite the 2 verses of Surah Talaq, for example. وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. The verses are in front of you. You just recite that 11 times at Fajr time, you'll see money comes to you. For example, if you want to become a millionaire, there's stuff for that as well. Saturday morning at Fajr time you wake up and you recite something, I'm not going to give you that one. Well, then we have to sign a contract. We'll get the commission for the mosque as well. Every time I come, the mosque is incomplete yet, inshallah. We'll get 20% of whatever you earn goes to the mosque. Nevertheless, there's stuff for everything. For example, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam he teaches a nuskha for those illnesses which have no cure. I've seen in my own life, in the city of Kuwait and Pakistan, 11 people from cancer were cured because of this. 11 people. Just reciting this one. And the person carrying it out was a doctor. After helping 11 people, he said, my own basira, I could see the grave and the reality of the grave just by these dhikr that Imam Ja'far Sadiq has taught us. And all of the Sunnis, if you look at these Sufi tariqas, they all go through Imam Ja'far Sadiq as well. So we believe in it as common for us. Whether you're Qadri goes from the 8th Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa Rada goes up to the Prophet. Even if you're Naqshbandi, you go for Imam Ja'far Sadiq. If you look at the Chishti, for example, Imam Ja'far Sadiq fits on their silsila. So in this way, there's not much difference between us. What is the difference between us, really? Not much. The problem is that we're still discussing, should we pray like this or should we pray like that? If we were to come together with the love of the Prophet and his family today, our differences would solve. Have you not seen those people from the UAE who pray with their arms down for the Sunni? So this can be finished, these differences. Allah says in the Quran, pray. He doesn't say pray like this or like this or like this. We go to the Sunnah and we find out. Some people believe that this hadith is, and some people believe that this hadith. The idea is that we're trying our best. The idea is establish prayers. Salah, or ask us. Pray. So pray. How you pray, that depends on which imam you follow, that which fiqh you follow. But if you have certainty that this is the right way, then pray it. Asr is the prayer. Asr is the fasting. Asr is the zakat. Asr is helping people. Asr is being good to your parents. Asr is helping that old woman cross the road. Asr is what? Not doing riba, not doing backbiting or slander, not doing any of these things. That's the asr. Asr is to be a good human being and to follow the way that you believe that the Prophet has told us. To remember the Prophet, to have love for the Prophet. So I'll give you an example, a couple of the things that they were reciting. They, for example, were reciting the dhikr of Ya Hayyu, Ya Qayyum. Right? What is this? Ya Hayyu, Ya Qayyum, according to our hadith, is this. That whenever you have depression, now I'm going to give this nuskha to you. If you have depression and you feel depressed, if a person was to slowly recite Ya Hayyu, Ya Qayyum, slowly, and then to repeat this, you would see the depression or that edginess within inside of you slowly goes away. And if you were to do this every day, the best time to do it after Fajr. Many of our ulama said, for example, Ayatollah Kashmiri has said, he said that if you want rizq to come, money to come, wealth to come, and your body to be salim and good after Fajr, until the rising of the sun, recite Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum. Slowly recite it, and you'll see there's a big difference that comes into your heart. Many people who have seen Kashf and Shuhud also, they've seen it with this dhikr of Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum, for example. In the same way, you have hadith within Rasul Kafir that says if a person recites this tasbihat arba that we have, Allahu Akbar, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, you heard all of this. Allah makes a tree in heaven. So for every time you recite this, you are creating for yourself a garden in heaven. That's also there. In the same way, istighfar does what? It removes the difficulties and the barriers from between us. I'll give you an example. One of the great mystics within Iran, Ayatollah Bahjat, was asked one day. A person came a couple of years ago, I remember this. Says that, look, says, Shaykh, our daughter's not getting married. She's in her 30s now. She's not getting married. What should we be doing? You know what he replies? He says, I want you to recite two things the whole day. Right? When you can't recite any more of one, then recite the other. And then after that, when you can't recite any more of the other, recite that one. He says, what is it? He said there are two things that if a person was to recite this, the difficulties in life become cured. Why? Because of our sins, there's difficulties that come in our life. I'll give you an example first, before I go to this. Zina, let's say. God forbid somebody does that. There's 6 torments in this world for zina. One of them is Allah decreases your life. Second, the nur of your face goes. Thirdly, the barakah from your rizq disappears. So many people, even though they may be earning 5,000, 10,000 pounds, I've seen it with my own life. They say, but there's no barakah in our money. It goes like this. And there's a person with 1,000 pounds a month, and his money is lasting longer. He says, we don't even know where it goes. Allah takes the barakah away from people's rizq, but more so, He removes the barakah from your life so you become depressed. I'll give you another example. A person who's very angry by nature, you'll see they die early. A person who doesn't do silah rahim, hadith says Allah cuts their life. If your mother is not happy with you, all of the difficulties come, but the biggest difficulty you'll find is depression. When family members, brothers, sisters, children, parents cut ties with each other, Allah puts depression in your life. And you suffer, and you begin to suffer. Right? All of these problems come. So first and foremost, it's important for us to make sure all of these relationships are mended. But sometimes we do sins and we don't even understand we're doing them. We don't understand, do we? We don't understand that we're doing certain sins. I'll give you an example. Sometimes we do sins with the tongue we don't understand. According to ulama, there are over 100 sins in the tongue. This is why the likes of Junayd al-Baghdadi would always keep their mouth quiet, and Sahaba would put stones in their mouth, so that whenever they talk, they'd realize they're talking. The most vicious thing is your tongue. Because of your tongue, what happens? You create for yourself hell. Ayatollah Bahjud, who had over 27 karamat, how did he achieve that? 4 years he didn't talk to anyone. 4 years he went quiet. Not even a word. If he wanted to go to the grocery, write down on a piece of paper, he'd say, give me this. 4 years. He says, I didn't do anything more than just control my tongue. Because of this, Allah gave me 27 karamat. 27. See, the tongue. Be careful. Today we use it as a sword. Insult people, do ghiba about people, overemphasize people, slander people, hurt people. All of these things with the tongue. Not realizing that for every time we do this, something in our life, Allah is taking away from us. Remember what the hadith is. Opportunities are like passing clouds. The minute they pass, they never come back again. You're losing opportunities in your life for betterment in this world and in the hereafter. What is the best thing therefore you could do? Now coming back to what Ayatollah Bahjud said to that person whose daughter wasn't getting married. He says do things. Firstly, do istighfar. Why? Because there's a blockage there because of which your dua is not being accepted. Every time you do istighfar, what do you say? Astaghfirullah, you're repenting to Allah. Wa atubu ilayh, and you're going back towards Allah. You are breaking the different veils. The hijab is breaking and you're going back to Allah. He says, but when you get tired of that, then the second thing you should do is send durood on Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. In whatever formula you do, in whatever way that you do, but the important thing is to send durood. Why? Because from this durood, what happens? Angels are involved in this, Allah is involved. And Allah loves His Prophet, right? You saw just now when the brother was mentioning. And I'll quote the Quran. He mentioned it. I'll quote the Quran. In kuntum tuhibbun Allah, fattabi'uni yuhbibkum Allah. Allah will love you. Follow the way of the Prophet. Send salutations on the way of the Prophet. Why? Because Allah will love you. So in this way, this person says, he says that 40 days hadn't completed when a very good proposal came from my daughter. Today they have a child and they're happily married. You see, very simply, you neglect these things. Allah's given it to you. It's in your hands. You neglect them. You go through court cases, you neglect them because you think, oh, this is a small thing. It's not a small thing, my friends. If you truly were to put your faith into the Prophet and his family as the wasila between you and Allah, Allah will accept it. Allah does not turn away. Who does not turn away his Habib? But more so, I'm going to give you one final tradition and then I'm going to move on. The tradition is this. Look, I can see around me, I'm looking at faces. There are people here with problems, right? People here going through trial and tribulations, right? People here who have family problems. People who can't find jobs. People who are struggling. Let me tell you something. I'm going to give you a tradition from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. You know that tradition? Listen to this carefully. You can edit this later. This is only for you, brother. Listen to this. Imam says, he says, when you have a serious problem, right, that type of problem where you can't find a solution for, you've gone to every door and you find at that moment your friends reject you, your family turns you away, you have no one to go to. It's as if, as it says, it's like the world is falling on you. You have nowhere to run, you have nowhere to do. At that moment, you know what the Imam says? He says, when you are in problems and when you are in difficulty, at that moment do what? And I say to all of you, today do dua, especially for one another. Why? Because you're in this majlis here. You're doing the dhikr of Allah and His Prophet and His family. Today duas become mustajab. Think to yourself and think, today I'm not sitting here, but I'm sitting in Medina. If you were sitting in front of the Prophet, what would you say? Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq says this, the one who all of us believe in. He says that when you have a huge problem and you can't find a solution to this problem, at that moment in time do what? At that moment in time do what? The most important thing at that moment is this. When you can't find any solution, then call on my mother Fatima al-Sahara. Call on my mother. At that moment call on her. And you'll find that she comes and she helps you. So therefore, this is that majlis where we've had the dhikr of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, we've done the dhikr of Allah. That problem that's fallen on you so deeply that you can't find an answer to it. If you're here today, Allah's called you for a reason. Because Allah's Rahim and Kareem and Rahman. Allah wants your dua to be fulfilled. Today say to Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, for the sake of your daughter Fatima. For every father, their daughter is very close to them, right? Fathers, there's one thing about a father, their son's pain they can bear, their daughter's pain they can't bear. Rasulullah starts crying at the pain of Fatima. Who narrates this? Allama Juwaini, the teacher of Imam Ghazali. It's not a Shia, it's a Sunni. Narrates within his book, Allama Juwaini says, he says Rasulullah began to cry. The companion said, Ya Rasulullah, why are you crying for? In summary, you can read the hadith, but he says in summary, because I can see the pain of Fatima after me. It's the pain of Fatima, because I can see it. In the same way, go back to the tradition and see, what could Ali ibn Abi Talib not bear? The pain of Zainab. What is it that Imam Hussein couldn't bear? The pain of Sakina. Pain of Sakina. What did he say? He says, Sakina, you have more right to cry over me than anybody else, because more dhulm will happen. And what did Yazid do to all of the family on one side? Who did he test? He says, Sakina, I heard you were very close to your father Hussein. I heard you were very close to your father Hussein. Look at the Karbala and see, the only person Yazid tests is the daughter of Hussein. He ignores everyone. He says, Sakina, I heard you were very close to your father Hussein. If your father loves you so much, why don't you ask your father to come to you? Hadith says this, Sunni Shia both narrated. 4-year-old girl raises her hand, she says, Father, to the cut head of Imam Hussein, she says, Father, Yazid's testing my love. In the tradition, his head rises and comes towards her lap. This is a father. This is a father. Now imagine this. If today you were to sit and say, Ya Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, we all love you here. We're all your followers here. You're Rahmatul Alameen. We've been to every door and all of the doors are closed. Today we're coming to your door because we know that your door never closes on anyone. But Rasulullah, just to make sure we've come with something that's very precious to you. And we ask you for the sake of your Fatima, please remove the difficulties in all of these people's life and all of our lives. This is important, you see. Tears have come into your eyes, right? I can see. These tears are a mercy of Allah. These tears are a mercy of Allah. Wasilahu al-baqa. Your crying that you do, this is your weapon in front of Allah. When you come towards Allah, come with an eye that's got tears in them. Allah loves these eyes. Come with tears in your eyes. When you stand there in front of Allah, it shows you humility. So today, let no one go without the dua not being answered. Make your connection, you see. As I talk, look inside of your heart. Look into your heart, and if you want to clear your mind, Order 5 said, recite La ilaha illallah in your mind, clear your heart, and then look into your heart and focus upon Rasulullah. And say, Ya Rasulullah. If you close your eyes, you can see what? You can see the green dome. You can see Medina. Baqi is here. Rasulullah's grave is here. You go inside, you say salam. You are now speaking to Rasulullah because Rasulullah is here with us. When you do the majlis of Rasulullah, he's here. And then you say, Ya Rasulullah. All of us are what? Your lovers. We've fallen into problems as an ummah. Rasulullah, for the sake of your beloved daughter, help us. Help us. The one dua that comes into my mind is this: may Allah keep our unity together. May Allah keep our unity together. All of us, whether it's our Shia brothers or our Sunni brothers, may Allah keep us one, so that tomorrow we can stand with the Prophet and say, we kept the unity. We did what the Quran says, وَلَا تَفَرُّقُ. We didn't divide. We did dhikr here, we did dhikr there. We went to their majlis, they came to our majlis. And from there and ours, it became us. It became us. This is what it is. We must become us now. And there, the other, he, she, this is no use. Now we are us, we are together. And we are united. And we are united behind that message of the Prophet. This is where the barakah of Allah comes. We are united. So look, essentially, I don't want to take too much of your time. But I'm just going to say 2 words more. And that is this. Look, 3 things move from your community and your community will be successful. 3 things. Write this down. Your dua will be answered. Your community will flourish. Your enemy will not overcome you. 3 things. That's it. Number one, remove riba from your community. Do not talk about a brother behind his back. Don't do that. If you stop this sin, Allah will increase your barakah, Allah will answer your dua, Allah will make you strong. That person does riba. Let me give you the hadith. If he repents, he'll be the last person to heaven. And if he doesn't, he could die the death of a kafir on his deathbed. Riba. Remove that. Number one, remove riba. Number two, be a person who when you see ikhtilaf, you solve the ikhtilaf. This is the seerah of the prophets. You know what the hadith says? 72 benefits, 71 in heaven, one of them in this world. That one is enough to remove your difficulty that you're having at the moment. Therefore, Allah gives you an opportunity. When you see two people doing riba, that's an opportunity from Allah. Go and resolve the problem. Why? Because by you resolving that problem, Allah will remove your difficulty. So what's important for us to do then? Bear this in mind. What's important for us to do, therefore, is to make sure that we remove differences from people, wherever you see it. Hadith says even if you have to lie. You see in your community two people are fighting, say, no, you know what, he praised you, he called you a good guy. Resolve that issue. So number two, be people who resolve differences. Second thing, riba needs to go. Resolving the differences, right? Resolving the differences. And the third thing, as a community, which is important as well, we have to do as a community. As a community, we must have lessons, we must have majalis to do what? To remind people how to do tasqiyah nafs, purify your own self, how to better your own self, to better your akhlaq. Because you know what? We have a huge problem with akhlaq.